Last time we talked about why economic profits are zero in the long run. So let's briefly review, and then we're going to enter in the average variable cost curve and talking about the shutdown decision. So here we are. Here's our supply and demand curve. Here's the equilibrium price. And this is the market. And this is the firm. Okay. And this is the price. This is also the marginal revenue. It's also average revenue, and it's also the perfectly elastic demand curve for the firm's product. Enter the marginal cost curve. The firm will profit maximize or loss minimize. They produce the output at which marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Okay, here remember that this line is also marginal revenue. So marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Right there, this is the profit maximizing, or again, loss minimizing level of output. Are they making a profit or not? Well, to know that, we need to have the average total cost curve. And in the long run, it's going to look like that, where this is average total revenue, and here's average total cost. So at this output, we go up here and we find average total revenue. We go up here, find average total cost. You can see they're equal to each other. So average total revenue minus average total cost, in this case, equals 0 because average total revenue, equals average total cost. Okay, so in this situation, firms have no incentive to enter the industry because profits are 0, economic profits. That means you're no better off doing this than you would be elsewhere doing something else. So there's no incentive to enter the industry, and there's no incentive to leave the industry, since there's nothing else out there where you're going to be doing any better. So the market's just going to stay like this for now. Here's a situation where the firm is making an economic profit. So once again, first we find where the firm will produce. Again, if they produce. The profit maximizing or loss minimizing level of output is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That is right there. Now, at that output, we go up. Well, let me change the color. We go up and we find average total cost. There's average total cost. And average total revenue right there, average total revenue. And we can see that average total revenue is greater than average total cost. So since it's greater, they're making an economic profit. Are they going to be able to hang on to that long term? No, they are not. This will incentivize other firms to enter this industry. A positive economic profit means they're doing better than they could be doing elsewhere. So people and firms in this industry are really making a killing. So what's going to happen as firms enter the industry? The supply curve. Now, keep in mind, no one firm can shift that market supply curve. But when a bunch of them enter, well, that's going to make a dent. And that supply curve will shift until, boom, about right there. Here's a new price, marginal revenue, average total revenue, and the new perfectly elastic demand curve. Now, where is the profit maximizing firm going to produce? Again, nothing has changed. It's where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So that would be right here now. So right there, that is now the new equilibrium, or the level of profit maximizing level of output. So at this output, here is the average total revenue. At this output, here is the average total cost. So average revenue and average cost are equal now, and those economic profits have been competed away. At this point, there's no reason why firms would continue to enter the market, and there's no reason anybody would leave. So there we are. Okay, right there. Now, let's suppose that the demand for this product falls. We've got a new demand curve. And let me erase some of this so clean this up a little bit. All right, so now, as you can see, marginal revenue equals marginal cost right here. So this is the profit maximizing level of output, or loss minimizing. Well, let's see. At this output, and that's what they're going to produce if they produce it all. Again, that's where marginal cost equals marginal revenue right there. So this level of output, let's see, here's average revenue. So let's put that out here. And here's average cost up here. So again, we find this level of output, then we go up and we pick off. There's average revenue. There's average cost. And we can see average cost is bigger than average revenue, so there's negative economic profits. So it means firms in this industry are not doing as well as they could be doing elsewhere. Well, a negative economic profit, a couple of things are going to go on. First of all, the firm needs to decide if, in the short run, do they loss minimize by shutting down, or do they loss minimize by continuing to operate? Now, in the long run, they're going to exit the industry. They're going to leave. They're not going to do this long term. Nobody's going to make economic losses over the long haul. They'll go do something else. So, are they going to shut down or not? Well, that all depends on whether or not they are covering their variable costs. Now I'm going to put in the average variable cost curve. Make that in blue so we can see it. Average variable cost. Okay. Now, this firm will loss minimize by continuing to operate. Well, why is that? First of all, let's pick off the, at this output, here's average variable cost right there. So let's bring that out to the side so we can see. So we can see that average variable cost is less than average revenue. Okay, average revenue is less than average total cost, so they're having an economic loss, but because they can cover their average variable cost, they loss minimize by operating. Why? Well, what is average total cost minus average variable cost? What does that equal? That equals average fixed cost. Okay, remember? Average fixed cost plus average variable cost equals average total cost. Or take away the averages. Just fixed cost plus variable cost equals total cost. Therefore, average fixed cost plus average variable cost equals average total cost. And it works in reverse. Just a little algebra. Average total cost minus average variable cost equals average fixed cost. So here's average total cost. Here's average variable cost. So this distance right here, that is average fixed cost. And if we want to know the actual fixed cost, total fixed cost, all we have to do is multiply this distance here by Q, and that'll give us the total fixed cost. But we can deal with averages. That'll be fine. If they shut down, they still have their fixed costs. Okay, in the short run. Remember, they're shutting down. They're not exiting the industry. They're not selling out and just leaving. So if they shut down, they're going to lose their fixed costs. But if they continue to operate, notice their revenues are covering their variable costs. Their revenues are bigger than their variable costs. So with each unit of output, see, they're getting this. They're getting this right here above and beyond variable costs. So they're actually minimizing their losses. Okay, this distance here would be the loss if they shut down. If they operate, the loss is only this distance, the difference between average total revenue and average total cost. So this difference here is better than this whole thing here. Okay. Well, let's throw in some numbers here. Let's say this is 5, let's say that's 8, and let's say that's 10, and let's say this is 10. Okay, so if they shut down, they will lose their fixed costs. So, you know, they'll still have to pay the rent on the factory, let's say. Or if they borrowed a bunch of money, they'll still have to make payments, okay? So they'll have those costs. Even if the factory's just sitting there idle, they still have to pay for that. So their average fixed cost is this distance. Well, what is that? That would be 10 minus 5. So their average fixed cost is 5, and then times Q, 10, so their fixed cost is 50. That's what they're going to lose if they don't operate. If they do operate, however, their loss per unit is only the difference between average total cost and average total revenue, right there. In other words, the difference between 10 and 8. So their profit per unit equals 2. In this case, it's negative 2, okay, times 10 units. So their economic loss is $20. If they shut down, their economic loss is their fixed cost, which is $50. So yeah, losing 20 is better than losing 50. So if you can cover your variable costs, you loss minimize by staying open. Let's look at this situation now. Okay, sorry, that looks like a L, marginal cost. Okay, first step. Where do they produce if they produce? Where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right there. So there we go. There's the quantity, profit maximizing or loss minimizing quantity. So up here is our average variable cost. Up here is our average total cost. And down here is our average total revenue. Okay. So let's give these some numbers. Again, some easy numbers. Let's say this is, let's say this is 2, this is 5, this is 8. Should this firm shut down in the short run? Did they loss minimum? Okay, they're making a loss, obviously. Well, let's go through that. Average total revenue minus average total cost equals, see, that's 2 minus 8 equals what? So they're making $6 per unit a loss, or a total loss of, that's profit per unit, and multiply that by 10 units. So they've got a loss of, an economic loss. Well, no, it's not an economic loss of negative 60. It's an economic profit of negative 60. So they're losing 60. They're $60 worse off than they could be elsewhere doing something else. Okay. If they shut down, they'll lose their fixed costs. So what are their fixed costs? Well, their fixed cost per unit, or average fixed cost, is average total cost minus average variable cost. So that's their fixed cost per unit, which is 8 minus 5. So 8 minus 5 equals 3. Fixed cost per unit times that by 10 equals $30. So 10 units, fixed cost per unit is 3, so their fixed cost is 30. That's their fixed cost. And if they shut down in the short run, they lose their fixed cost of $30. How about if they stay open? Well, if they stay open, you know, they're going to lose this whole thing here, that distance. If they shut down, they only lose this distance, right, on a per unit basis. So what do you want to lose? Would you rather lose the $30 fixed cost, or would you prefer to continue to operate and lose the $60? So the rule is, if your revenues are below variable cost, you shut down. So where's your indifference point? Your indifference point is right here. Right there. Make a big dot there. That's it. Because if you shut down, you lose this distance, your fixed cost. But if you operate, you lose this distance. Okay, that's the difference between your average total revenue and average total cost. So you're going to lose the same amount either way. The indifference point would probably mean you stay open, because you'd rather stay open than shut down. If they're both the same, you're going to stay open. So, keep the crew operating, keep people employed, that kind of thing. Only if this thing, dips below there are you going to shut down. Okay. Now, the difference between, okay, so let's review here. Let me write this stuff down. If average total revenue is greater than average total cost, you've got an economic profit. And if average total revenue is less than average total cost, you have an economic loss or a negative economic profit. Okay, that's pretty intuitive. If average total revenue is less than average variable cost, well, let me write that differently. If average total revenue is less than average total cost, but greater than average variable cost, and that might not be the most eloquent way to put it, but in other words, average total cost sits in the middle of average total revenue and average variable cost, you've got an economic loss or negative economic profits, but you loss minimize by operating, by staying in operation. However, if average total revenue is less than average total cost and less than average variable cost, okay, and well, if average variable cost is greater than average total revenue, let's just keep it simple, sorry about that. If average variable cost is greater than average total revenue, so average revenue is less than average variable cost, if you can't even cover your variable cost, shut down, okay? You loss minimize by shutting down. So the key is, what do you make? If you're making a profit, obviously that's great. You're not going to hang on to that long term. If you're making zero economic profits, you're fine. You're doing what, you're doing what you're doing, and you're as well off as you can be doing something else, so everything's good. If you're making an economic loss, now you've got to decide if you loss minimize by shutting down or staying open. And the key is, if you're covering your variable costs, you loss minimize by staying open. If you're not, you loss minimize by shutting down and eating only your fixed cost. Now, the difference between shutting down and exiting the industry. This reminds me of, I used to live down in Fort Myers, Florida. And I know students always say, well, what are you doing up here? Well, believe it or not, we got bored. I mean, almost drop dead bored. There in God's waiting room. You can't beat Florida in the winter. There's like 3 months where it's just, can't be beat. But year round, okay, come on, you got to be kidding. Anyway, off of that. But I remember there were I don't know how many boat companies, how many trips. If you go straight south, Fort Myers is on the Gulf Coast, and if you go straight south from there, you will hit Key West. It's about a 5-hour boat ride straight south to Key West. And it seems like there were like 5 companies that did that in the winter. But what happens in Florida in the summer? Nobody wants to be down there in the summer. It's miserable in the summer. So in the summer, I think there was only one that continued to operate to Key West. What happened to the other four? Well, they didn't leave the industry. They just parked their boat and waited for winter. And the reason is because there's not enough business. Now look, what are the fixed costs? Well, the fixed costs, let's just simplify. Let's just say the only fixed costs are the boat payment and the storage to store it there at the harbor. Those are the fixed costs. The variable costs, if you're going to operate, well, you got to get gasoline. You got to fill the boat with gas. You got to get a crew, to take care of the passengers, and so you got to get someone to drive the boat. You probably got to get someone to play the guitar and sing, okay, and some food. So, but those are costs that are incurred only if you operate. So those are variable costs. Well, let's say your variable costs are $1,000, and you sell a ticket to down to Key West for $200, and you get one passenger. Well, you're not covering your variable costs. You got one passenger paying $200, but your variable costs are $1,000. You're adding $1,000 to get $200. Forget it. Are you going to do that all summer long? No, you're not. You're going to park your boat and wait for winter, when you can get 10 or 15 people on the boat, right? So you can make a profit. Well, that's what happens. They do not exit the industry. They simply shut down for the summer. And there are restaurants down there that sometimes do the same thing. Various attractions shut down in the summer. They don't exit the industry. Okay, these boats, nobody sells their boat. They don't sell the boat and go home and go and get another job. So that's the difference. That's shutting down is just closing your doors for a while, and exiting the industry means you just can't make a living at this, and that you don't see the market as changing. See, when you're shutting down, you're hoping the market changes. Well, in Florida, it's seasonal, so you know it's going to change. It's going to change as soon as winter comes back, so you can pretty much count on that. But in other industries, well, maybe it's temporary. Maybe you're trying to outlast the other firms. You're all trying to outlast each other. One of you are going to break down and leave the industry, and the other one's going to be okay. But you want it to be, the other guy that leaves and not you. So you're trying to hang on, waiting, see who leaves first. But in the long run, if things don't improve, you exit the industry. And maybe the industry just dies out altogether. So that is the situation with the shutdown versus the exit the industry. Now let's look at why we like perfect competition. There's some things that are really nice about it. The first one is that because price equals marginal cost. Okay, remember the price equals marginal revenue, but the firm's going to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which means price and marginal cost are equal. The firm will operate where price equals marginal cost. Well, the price is the value your customers, or society, I should say, places on this good or service. The marginal cost is the value of the resources used to produce this good or service. Now, you might be thinking, well, duh, what's the big deal there? Well, as we will see, that will not be the case with monopoly. So the value society places on the good is equal to the value of the resources used to produce the good. That is efficient use of resources. So we've got that. Also, what we like is well, there's a lot of things, but the main that's a big thing there. And another big thing, it forces firms to adopt new technology. In fact, there's a huge incentive to develop new technology. So if new technology is developed, you're going to have to adopt it. You can't just stay with the old ways. And I'll show you why in a minute. And it's an incentive. It's an incentive to create new technology, better ways of doing it. So here's the reason. Here's our price with marginal revenue, average total revenue, and demand curve. And here you are. Okay, average total cost curve right there. And here's the profit maximizing level of output. And as you can see, average revenue equals average cost. You're in long run equilibrium, making an economic profit. Now, so you're farming. You have no power over the market. You cannot affect the price at all. You're a price taker. You're good, no matter how hard you may try to tell people that your wheat is better than the guy next door. Nobody would believe you. That's why you don't see a lot of advertising. You don't see a lot of individual farmers advertising. It's a waste of money. It's just a cash outflow. You may convince a few people that your stuff's better than the guy next door, but you're not going to convince enough to make it worthwhile to advertise. And that's another item we like about perfect competition. Not a lot of resources go into advertising. So anyway, here's the thing. Farmer Jones, he has a strong incentive to create a better way to do this. And if he can figure out a better way, that is going to lower his costs. Now his average costs are down here. Okay, let's don't worry about marginal revenue at this point. Let's just look at the cost. His cost curve's going to shift down. Everything's going to shift down. So, well, I guess I should. Here we got marginal revenue there, and then we've got, marginal cost there, and then we've got the new one here. Everything just shifts down. The whole cost curves just shift down. Boom. So now you can see he is making an economic profit right there. So what are the other guys going to do? Well, they're going to adopt the same technology. And their cost curves will be lower too. And so they're going to increase output, and pretty soon the supply curve is going to shift to the right, and they're going to be back at zero economic profits again. And this is what happened to farming, actually. And farmers got too productive for their own good, basically. And as they got more and more technology and better ways of farming, that supply curve, well, I should have drawn. The supply curve just kept shifting out. And what happens to the price? It keeps going down. Now, we, the consumers of farm output, think that's wonderful. And every farmer has to adopt the new technology, because otherwise their costs are going to be, okay, what happens here? What happens here to the farmer that doesn't adopt the new technology? The price is going to be down here now. It's like the market's going to adjust, but you're going to be up there. You've got higher costs but a lower price. you can't cover your costs now. You have to adopt the new technology just to compete. And then in the long term, that just amounts to zero economic profits again. So as farmers got better, better, and better, and better, and the price just keep coming down, 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 we, the people, think that's great. But what happens to farming? And by the way, what kind of good is food? When I talk about what kind of good, what is the elasticity demand for food? Well, it would be less than 1, which means it's inelastic. Not a lot of substitutes for food, guys, is there? So, inelastic demand. And what happens when it's price inelastic and the price goes down? What happens to total revenues? Total revenues go the direction of price. Total revenues go down. And this is tragic. So great news, new technology, new productivity, but except that they operate in a perfectly competitive market. A perfectly competitive market when you've got inelastic demand for your product. You know, it sounds great having inelastic. It sounds great selling a good that has inelastic demand. If you're a monopolist, okay. But if you're in a perfectly competitive market structure, this is disaster. So this is why we say the farmers were too productive for their own good. And that's why something called agricultural price supports came along. Minimum price to try to help farmers stay in business. Those created their own problems because they resulted in overproduction. And then to keep the excess off the market, the firm would have to buy, or the government would have to buy up the difference, and that led to a long list of issues there. But that's the purpose of it. The intent was to help with this inelastic demand and perfect competition thing. Okay, so what we like about perfect competition, goods are efficiently allocated, firms enter and exit the industry at will. We've got efficient use of resources, and new firms are forced to adopt new technology. Overall, we like that. New technology, more productivity, better ways of doing things is on balance a good thing. It wasn't for the farmers, but overall, long term, better ways are better. Okay, new technology, yes. Well, we talk about this more in macroeconomics, but productivity, does have its costs. New jobs replace old jobs. New ways of doing things replace old ways of doing things. And but the results have been, long term, have been that the new jobs are higher paying than the old jobs. The downside is that the old jobs, the people who get displaced, sometimes don't have the skills to move into the new jobs, as they require more technical education. So what we do is we allow that to happen as a public policy, but then we will help retrain workers. That so far is the best way we can think of to deal with that. So firms are forced to adopt new technology, and we like that. No resources wasted on advertising. I shouldn't say wasted, but there's not an incentive to advertise, whereas in other market structures you just see tons of advertising trying to differentiate their product, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly. But more about that later.